Good afternoon and welcome back to Stories with Don. We are reading Robin Hood, and today we are on chapter 7, entitled How Robin Hood Won the Sheriff's Prize. As I recall, this is a good chapter, and I don't think it's too long. Let me look. No, we can do this all today. All right, chapter 7. After the wedding of Allan a Dale, the bishop posted off to Nottingham to make complaint to the sheriff against Robin Hood. "How are you placed in authority by our noble king to keep order?" fumed the angry bishop, "and you permit that sturdy outlaw Robin Hood to rule the country as if he himself were king." And altogether the bishop rated the sheriff in such a fashion that the latter became very uneasy, lest the matter should be brought before the king. "If complaint is to be made to the king, and it looks very likely," said the sheriff to himself, "I had better go to the king myself and explain what a difficult fellow to deal with is this Robin Hood." So the sheriff posted off to London and told the king that he could do nothing with Robin Hood, for the outlaws were so strong and bold and knew every corner of the forest so well that his men could not catch them. "What can I do?" cried the king. "Are you not sheriff in order to deal with these matters? You have all the power of the law behind you to punish those who injure you. If you cannot meet the rogues with strength, bethink yourself of some way of drawing them into your power in another fashion. In any case, get you gone, and let me hear that you have put them down, or it will be the worse for you." Seeing that the king was angry, the sheriff went hastily from his presence and took the road homeward. Day after day, as he rode north towards Nottingham, did the sheriff cudgel his brains for a plot by which he could hoodwink the outlaws, and at last he smote his thigh and laughed aloud. "I have it," he said to the new chief forester who rode beside him. "I have it. I will draw those sturdy rogues into Nottingham town as surely as the smell of roast meat draws a hungry dog." "And how will you do it?" asked the chief forester. "In this way," replied the sheriff. "Thou knowest that Robin Hood and the rascals who follow him brag and boast that they are the best archers of all that ever shot at butt or deer. Now I will proclaim a great shooting match to be held at Nottingham, and the chief prize shall be an arrow with golden feathers and silver shaft, and he who wins that arrow shall also be hailed as the greatest archer of the land." I see," laughed the chief forester. "A proper bait to draw those bragging rogues to your hand." "A certain bait," cried the sheriff. "It will prove that, mark my words, for they will never submit to see that title won without some of them making a trial to win it. And then, when they come into the town, I will have men who know them on the watch, ready to seize them." So the sheriff went home. And soon the day of the great shooting match was proclaimed, and the news spread fast. Lob the cobbler carried the news to Sherwood, and told the outlaws that famous archers from all the country round were coming to Nottingham to contest for the handsome prize and the famous title. "And the winner is to be proclaimed as the best bowman of the land?" cried Robin. "Yes, master," replied Lob, "and it is said that all the best archers of the shires will try for the prize." "Why," said Robin, "I think we count ourselves as good shots as any, and 'twere foul shame to let the title be seized, and we make no effort to gain it." "Have a care, master," said one of his followers, a stout bowman called David of Doncaster. "I have heard that the match is but a trick to draw us into the town, and so beguile us." "That is coward's talk," said Robin Hood. "Trick or no trick, I'll be there." "Yes, we'll go," said Little John, "and I have a plan in my head which will take us there safely. We'll leave at home our cloaks and doublets of Lincoln green, and dress ourselves like country folk going to the match. Then the sheriff's men will not know us." One of us will wear white, another red, another yellow, another blue, and so be disguised. We'll go to the contest, whatever happens." "Good, good," cried the leader. "We will follow thy plan, Little John." So on the day of the great shooting match, Robin Hood and his best archers set out for Nottingham. They did not march in a company, for that would have drawn attention to them, but in twos and threes, scattered throughout the throng of country folk going to witness the day's sport. Not one man wore his dress of Lincoln green, but Little John wore a blue jacket and hood. Much the miller's son was in brown, Will Scarlet in white, Will Stutely in yellow, and marching alone was a man in a ragged red coat and hood, and that was Robin Hood himself. When Robin Hood came to the gate of the town, he marched straight in, his bow over his shoulder. Beside the gate stood some of the sheriff's men who knew the outlaws. They were watching carefully to see if they could recognize their enemies amid the crowd which trooped into the place. When the fellow in the tattered red coat strode through the gate, they glanced at him, but never dreamed it was their arch enemy. Robin had a patch over his left eye, and he had let his beard grow rough and ragged for the occasion, and he plodded along in stupid fashion. "Look at yon fellow in red," laughed a forester. "I verily believe every ragged rascal within 100 miles is tramping hither this day, in hope of gaining the golden arrow." Robin heard these words, but he only laughed to himself, and pushed forward to the place where the butts were set up for the match. Here sat the sheriff on horseback, surrounded by a strong guard of his men. And as the competitors gathered in a great crowd, the sheriff peered and pried on every hand for some sign of the outlaws whom he hated. But though his wily eyes searched the throng through and through, he could not see a single man who had the look of Robin Hood's band. Presently the shooting began, and soon it was seen that one of the finest bowmen there was a famous archer called William of York. But though William shot very finely, yet he could not get ahead of a band of country fellows in jackets of different colors. The people were delighted to see these poorly dressed men holding their own with the famous archer, and shouted their joy. One man cried, "Well done, Blue Jacket!" Another shouted, "Brown is the best!" A third cried, "Bravo, Yellow Coat!" And a fourth declared, "There is no one who can compare with the man in red." The man in red was, of course, Robin Hood, who was in the lead at every shot. In the end, the match lay between William of York and the archer in the ragged red jacket. A fresh butt was set up at a much greater distance than any yet had been placed, and the two archers took their places ready to shoot. They were to loose 3 shafts each, and many good bowmen shook their head when they saw how distant was the butt from the shooting point. "'Twere a feat to reach the butt at that distance," they said, "without getting anywhere near the center." And the crowd waited in silence to see the champions finish the contest. Behind the two competitors sat the sheriff and some of his friends on their horses. "We have seen some rare shooting already," said one of the sheriff's friends. "We could scarce have seen better if Robin Hood and his men had come to the match." "Aye," quoth the sheriff, scratching his head, "I thought he would be here, but with all his boldness, he did not dare." Almost at the nose of the sheriff's horse stood the archer in the red coat, leaning awkwardly on his bow, his mouth open and in a rustic gape, and his one eye staring at the distant butt. But lumpish and clownish as Robin made himself look, he had hard work to keep himself in hand when he heard the sheriff's jeer. He longed to turn and beard the sheriff to his face, but it was too dangerous at that moment, and he kept quite still, but said to himself, "Ere long thou shalt see, proud sheriff, that here is Robin Hood." William of York shot first, and shot very slowly and very well. He put 2 arrows in the white spot in the center of the target, and one a little outside. "Give up, Red Jacket," shouted William's friends. "Thou canst not surpass that shooting. Give up and yield the prize." But Red Jacket only grinned and shook his head. "I'll e'en try my luck," he growled aloud in a broad north country accent, and to himself he said, "Now, Robin, do thy best for the honor of Mary Sherwood." So Red Jacket took 3 shafts in hand, and discharged them so fast that the second was in the air before the first had reached the target, and so with the third. But to the wonder and delight of the spectators, the first and second arrows struck out from the center of the target, the arrows which William of York had placed there, and the third arrow lighted in the exact center of the white spot. "Red Jacket! Red Jacket!" roared the multitude. "He is the very prince of archers. Red Jacket has won the prize." So brave Robin Hood won the silver arrow with the golden feathers. When the arrow was presented, the sheriff said to Red Jacket, "Prithee, good fellow, join my band of foresters. I would like to see so stout a bowman as thou art in my service." But Robin shook his head and said he must go home to his own master. Then the sheriff thought that he was the serf of some lord who had obtained permission to come to the match, and pressed him no further. As the outlaws had come into the town, so they went out in 2s and 3s, and returned every one in safety to the greenwood. There they laughed and jested merrily over the day's sport, and admired the golden arrow, all that is but the winner himself, who seemed rather vexed. "You seem sad, master," cried Little John, "and you should be the merriest of all, since you have won the arrow and tricked the sheriff." "Aye, that's just where it is," replied Robin Hood. "The sheriff knows not how well we have caught him in his own trap. I like it not that he should not know that I carried off his arrow." "Well, that is easily done," cried Little John. "I advised you before, and I will advise you again. Write a letter to him, and I'll deliver it." "You, Little John?" said Robin. "Nay, I'll not have you venture back into that town." "I have a better plan than that," said Little John, laughing gaily. "I'll stick it on the head of an arrow and shoot it into the sheriff's window." This capital plan was carried out. The letter was written, and back went Little John, without changing his blue jacket, to the town. Near the wall was a lofty building, the house of the sheriff, and Little John marked that a window of the great hall was standing open. The shutter which closed it at night was hanging back. The giant had already fixed the letter to the head of a shaft, and now he drew his bow, shot the arrowed clean through the window, and trotted back to the forest. As it happened, the sheriff had just sat down to supper after a busy day, and was raising a brimming horn of ale to his lips as the shaft hummed in at the window and struck into the table before him, and stood there quivering. "What is this?" he cried. "An arrow shot into my hall? What does it mean?" "There is a billet at the head," cried a servant. "It is a message." "Unroll the paper from the shaft and give it to me," commanded the sheriff. This was done, and the paper was handed to the great man. He ran his eyes over it, still holding the horn of ale in the other hand, and all the company looked eagerly to see what this strange affair meant. Here's a picture of the sheriff eating, with the arrow landing in his table. To their surprise, the sheriff dashed down his horn of ale on the table with such force that the horn split and the ale flew in streams. "What is it? What is it?" cried a half-dozen voices. "Is it ill news?" "Aye," roared the sheriff, trembling with rage. "Ill news indeed. I had that arch rogue and strong thief at my very side today, and he hath slipped through my fingers. Who think ye that Red Jacket was? none other than that rascal Robin Hood himself. Every face was turned to the sheriff in wonder. That the famous Robin Hood? That crude, clownish fellow in the red jacket? Yet it must have been, for he had shot in such a marvelous a fashion. By my faith, Sheriff, said one of his friends, but we ought to have known it. Such archery never did I see in all my life before. None but Robin Hood could bend such a bow. But the sheriff took no heed of his friend's words. He was in such a rage that he knew not what to do. As the old ballad says, the sheriff the letter had, which when he read, he scratched his head, and raved like one that's mad. I'll lay plans for that knave no longer, roared the sheriff. I'll take him by strong hand. Not another day will I live before I have marched upon the rogue. Trust me, I'll dust his red jacket for him, and then hang him on the highest gallows ever raised in the good town of Nottingham. And that is the end of that chapter. So again, I wish you a pleasant afternoon. May you be well, and may God bless you. Goodbye.